Hi, my name is Rick Cutter with Cloud for Utilities. I'm here in Washington, D.C. this week for the Cloud for Utilities Summit 2018. I'm here with our advisory board members, except for Gary Waters, who's having a little travel difficulties. Talk a little bit about cloud and what's happened in the last year. I'm here with John Cullinane, Denise Kruger, and Tom Kuczynski. I'm going to ask you to kind of tell what they do at their different utilities, and we'll have a conversation. Hey, John. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Rick. Good to see you. John Cullinane. I'm Chief Security Officer for WGL, a local energy company based here in the District of Columbia. I've been with the team for 32 years and have spent the last year in the advisory board for Cloud for Utilities. So excited to be at our second conference and looking forward to a great couple of days.
Great, John. Denise, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Rick. Thank you for having me. My name is Denise Kruger, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Regulated Utilities at Golden State Water Company. We're a rate-regulated professional water company located in California, so out on the other coast, and it's good to be here. I've been on the advisory board for Cloud for a year now. At our utility, I oversee everything that really touches the customer, from water operations to asset management, engineering, water resources, and the like.
Tom, good morning. How are you?
Doing great, Rick. Thanks for having me. I'm Tom Kuczynski. I'm the CIO for DC Water. I'm responsible for all IT aspects of DC Water's business, including customer service, field operations, as well as SCADA and the process control systems. I'm glad to be part of the team, Rick.
Our other advisory board member, Gary Waters, is traveling right now, but won't be able to make it, but we'll catch up with him maybe later today or tomorrow. But I just want to have a conversation with you guys. Thank y'all for spending a little time with me. We've been doing this for a year now, and the market continues to change. That's certainly a constant. I'm just curious what you guys have seen in the last year. Are you feeling the uptick? I kind of am, that people are more and more moving apps or services into the cloud. And I'll start with you, Tom. Maybe what are you seeing out there, and what's your gut telling you?
Yeah, I think we're on the verge of an inflection point, Rick. I think we're reaching a point in the evolution of the technology where it's going to be easier, less expensive, and quicker to deploy solutions in the cloud than it ever was on-premise. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for anyone to take advantage of it. I think the early adopters certainly are going to gain more benefits sooner, while there'll probably be a struggle for resources as more and more people try to adopt these solutions. So I think the market will get a lot more competitive as well. But I think we're at a great point in the evolution of technology for utility systems.
Right. And Tom, you've put a lot of your apps in the cloud over at DC Water, I believe, right?
Yeah, we've got probably more than 50% of our portfolio in the cloud today. So we're fully Office 365. We've been on Office 365 for well over 2 years now. Okay. We've got our CIS system in the cloud. We've got our mobile work management. Our payment and presentment applications are in the cloud. We've got our HCM solution that's in the cloud. We've got an RFP now out on the street for a new financial system.
Oh, wow.
And
you going to put it in the cloud?
In the cloud.
Really?
And we've got a RFP that's getting ready to be published for both our open text document management solution and our Maximo work order and asset management system that'll also move to the cloud as well.
Oh, wow.
And with our new building, we've actually just moved our entire phone system off of a traditional PBX to Skype for Business in the cloud. And our new ACD system and IVR will run in the cloud after we get our call center moved as well.
You're the cloud first model child, it sounds like, you know. That's great. That's great. Denise, how's your year been? And I know people are calling you asking about cloud now, probably.
They for sure are, and I would say one of the big differences I've seen from last year to this year is much broader acceptance of cloud. I think a year ago we were still grappling with, is it okay, is it not okay? And we saw a lot of early adapters, and there seemed to be a lot of time spent convincing people that cloud was okay. And now I think we see a whole different excitement around it, and people are really planning on cloud and are convinced that it's okay. So I think that's one of the big changes we've seen. And at our utility, it's been the same transition.
Right.
And, we're not quite as far along as you are, but, we put our mobile workforce in the cloud and are excited to have done that versus on-premise.
That's great. Mm-hmm. That's great. Now, a couple years ago, John and I had a conversation about Washington Gas, and it wasn't like we're going to put everything in the cloud next week. It was a lot different than I think it is today. Tell us a little about what you guys are seeing?
Similar story. We continue to see broad adoption. I think some of the differences we're seeing is a lot more of what we were doing a few years ago was pure infrastructure that was there. We're seeing a lot more point solutions that are business process focused. Our business units are going after point solutions that they're finding and bringing them to us for adoption. We continue to set framework, though, in place around messaging systems, storage solutions, and core infrastructure that allows us to kind of switch some of the load there.
Wow.
We're seeing a lot of uptick around project dependencies, around lower environments and test environments, a quick way to jumpstart projects and have them get on board quick. That's been a very good adoption for us. It allows teams to kind of get going more quickly on data conversion, on testing, and some of the initial environments needed for projects.
Right.
So we've had a good, I'd say right now there's no fewer than half a dozen projects that are cloud-based that are in flight.
Great, great. Well, we've got some regulators here this week from Illinois and D.C. Certainly we'll be asking them lots of questions in the next couple of days. I'm just curious from you two guys, being investor-owned utilities, is the feeling that your PUCs are more open to cloud computing when it comes to putting it into the rate base, or is that still emerging? What are you feeling? I'll go with you first, Denise.
I would say it's still emerging, but I think there certainly is an openness to it.
Okay.
I think what we're seeing now is because there's a much greater understanding of the value proposition of cloud versus on-premise, that they are very much open to hearing then what the different possibilities are for rate regulation of that solution.
Okay. How about you, Jim?
I think locally, same message. I think continue to educate and collaborate with the local commission. Finance and accounting folks continue to seek kind of understanding and proper way to handle treatment for an allocation of those costs. But we've taken another little bit of an approach as well, which is what are those things we can demonstrate internally as those true additional cost offsets that help justify it? We used to really be on this path of CapEx or OpEx, but what we found there are some compelling offsets to those costs.
Right.
In terms, so we're getting close. I think we continue to be able to make the case why it makes sense to continue on the cloud path.
It's getting easier.
It for sure is getting easier. Yeah.
Tom, being in the government sector, I know that the PUC rate case isn't an issue for you guys, but what about accounting and capitalization? Are there issues y'all had to deal with on that to help the accountants be able to justify the dollars over that accounting period longer? Or?
I don't think it's a question of justification, Rick. I think it's a question of being able to better predict what your costs are going to be, whether they're operating or capital.
Okay.
And that's a little harder when you're in a transition phase because you're budgeting, and at least in our case, we're budgeting 2 years out.
Gotcha.
And a lot of times traditional IT budgets for project-based work would have been capitalized. And yet when you get to the point of implementation or decision-making, you say the better alternative here is either a SaaS model or a cloud-hosted model, which then shifts some of those costs out of capital into operating. Now you're sitting with an operating budget that was drafted 2 years ago, and you've got to figure out how you adjust that to compensate for the cost that you're going to now incur, potentially over a 5 or a 10-year horizon, whereas they would have been embedded in a capital budget that now you're not using those funds in capital. So I think the challenges were really on the accounting side, not the approval side, and we just need to figure out a better way to be able to predict some of these solutions and how that cost is going to be allocated for the accounting folks. Because at the end of the day, the IT guy and the business doesn't necessarily care. Their motivation is improving service and reducing cost. They don't necessarily care which bucket the dollars come out of.
Right.
But yet the accountants are struggling with capital budgets that are now underdrawn, and then there's the prospects of potential penalties on those funding sources and things like that. So that's really been the biggest challenge for us in that case.
Great. So one of the objections we hear, or I hear a lot from other utilities and other people in general, is I don't want my data in the cloud. I don't trust third parties with my information, cybersecurity. We hear the horror stories of the Targets of the world. My perception is that utilities are improving and more in regards to cybersecurity and spending more dollars and understanding it better, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. I'm just curious, kind of how are your individual utilities kind of attacking that from a cybersecurity perspective? And I'll start with you first, Denise.
Sure. I think, your comment about cybersecurity was really, I think, one of the reasons that our IT infrastructure in the past was very reluctant to cloud, because there was just with that feeling of lack of control, then you may not have control over security. But I think through conferences like Cloud for Utilities, where we're being educated that actually the security risks are not cloud versus premise, but what the true security risks are, across the spectrum, and coming to understand that you can have confidence in the security in the cloud has really opened up then and broadened the opportunities for us to look at cloud. I think it's really more of an education process, that's needed, and that is happening now.
How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I always use the home analogy, right? Just because you have the keys doesn't mean your house is secure, right? The door may not be locked, or the lock you have on the door may not be good enough to keep, the burglars out. Same exists for cybersecurity. The reality is that in a lot of cases, the investments that these cloud providers make are exponentially higher than the investments that you can make as a single utility. Partly because of the cost of those investments. And the reality is I'm not in the security business. I need security to protect my environment, but the cloud providers are both in the services business and the security business, because at the end of the day, if they don't do both well, especially if they don't do the security well, they won't have a service business. Right. So their business goes away if they get compromised.
Sort of what's your core business, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the reality is that a lot of times the security in the cloud is much better, even though you may not have the physical keys in your hands that you've traditionally had. So I agree with Denise. It's it is very much a control concern in a lot of cases, right, with the folks that are responsible for execution right now.
Thank you. John, what's your perspective on that?
I think we've turned the corner a bit on the perception of that. I think IT has helped educate.
It's been a hard one for us all to get over,
IT's been there and educating both ourselves and our business clients to it. The risk model changes a little bit, and I think part of what we get even from this conference is understanding where the responsibility of both the client and service provider, what those lines are, and where we pick up. Much more so for the technicians that we have to really give valuable solutions versus the mechanics that they used to do. So the secure mechanisms, I think in one of our earlier sessions today, it was said the same tenets hold true regardless of where it is. And I think we have to remember that. It took us a little time to grow to understand that we're really doing the same thing. The delivery model may look just a little different.
Right. One more question for you guys. So as we put applications into some sort of cloud, SaaS model, hosted, whatever you want to call the flavor of it, I hear different opinions on what system they will and will not go into those models. I'll never put my customer data. Well, now people are putting customer data out there. Big utilities are. Small utilities are. Is there a system you guys think that maybe at your utility, your perspective, that one probably the last one to go in some sort of cloud model? I'm just curious what you're thinking about that. And maybe you think they're all suitable for the cloud. I'll start with you, Tom.
I think the last one it'll go, and not because it can't, but simply because it's a bigger lift for the people that use that system every day. It's probably our SCADA system. There's simply an elevated level of concern about putting control and operating systems that operate equipment remotely, outside of your physical control. So I think that's likely the last one to go, but I don't believe it's impossible to do it. I think it's certainly possible to do it today. The technology that our SCADA and our PCS systems run on is the same technology that all of our other systems run on. That transition happened years ago. They're not proprietary systems anymore. But I just think it's a heavier lift for the people that are responsible for, especially in our case. What is ultimately a health safety issue, the delivery of clean water, to the nation's capital. So I think that'll probably be the last one, Rick.
Right. How about you, Denise?
Yeah, I would agree completely. I was asked that question last year at this conference. What would I never put in the cloud? And my answer was SCADA. If you were to ask me that same question today, I don't think I would put SCADA as in the never category, but I think it is in one of those ending categories, just really for those very reasons. And I don't think it has anything to do with as you mentioned, the technology is there. I think the security around it is there. It's really more of a culture, and being convinced that the security of our SCADA system in the cloud is just as good as the security of that system not in the cloud. And so it's really more of a culture shift, I think, a way of thinking for us, more than anything.
Right. John?
I agree. The answer would be the same. It would be our control environment. For a little different reason, I think ours has come about in a design and a philosophy that still lends itself towards internal management. The way we've constructed it, still dependencies on publicly available resources, virtualized resources as a whole, I think would still cause us a little bit of a challenge. Having said that, and Tom had brought up in an earlier session, one of the questions that had come up was, would we ever see any adoption of it? Our use case that we're looking at is for backup and recovery services.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's a great use case where we can get some benefit there and really make a positive difference in the integrity of the environment should we have an incident.
Great. All right, so you teed up another question now, so follow-up. I was meeting with the utility a few months ago and this topic came up. And what I'm finding is that the IT department manages every app except the SCADA systems, a couple utilities. I'm just curious from each of you, do you have a separate group? Is it like an engineering group that manages the SCADA system? But the IT systems seem to be the same as the other apps that IT manages. Do you think we really need to have the SCADA systems completely separated from IT? I'll start with Denise this time.
Okay, well, I am one of those utilities where it is separated.
Okay.
So the operations unit basically owns and operates and manages the SCADA system.
Okay.
You know, it has traditionally was built up that way and grew up that way, and for no other reason other than that. They, you know, when the IT infrastructure began to move more into a network, you know, infrastructure across all of our utilities across the state, our SCADA systems really stayed very local. We operate 39 different water systems all over the state. Our SCADA systems remained local, which I think helped us in terms of security. So if there was a breach at one utility, it was really difficult to have that move to another one, which was one of the reasons we kept them out of the general IT infrastructure, because we were able to maintain that, that separation. But that again is culture and history, and I think as we see more SCADA solutions move towards the cloud, then that's going to change the conversation.
Right. What do you think, John?
Similar. They're co-managed by teams, core infrastructure, a network within IT, application environment within the business unit. Very strong working relationship, though, that's over the years. They're collaborative with each other. And I think similar to what Denise described, it came about, the criticality of that system from its infancy required a dedicated and focused team to manage just that environment and not be distracted by anything else that they would be managing, and we've maintained that. We've had it both ways, but right now it's co-managed with two separate teams, and it works well.
How about you guys?
Yeah, we have a similar model in Washington. We have a collaborative working relationship with the SCADA group. We actually host their infrastructure in our data center, host and manage it, so we're able to provide services to them that they couldn't get in the past when they had those servers located at another facility. So we do backup recovery for them, and we actually do DR for them as well. And we own everything down to pretty much the communications connection at the facility that's being monitored. They typically do the application programming, and they do the PLC, RTU programming at the endpoints. But everything else in the middle is really managed and operated through IT. And then the infrastructure upgrades to the servers, patching and things like that is done by us as well, but in cooperation with the business. So, we manage that pretty closely due to the critical nature of the system. So we don't apply the patches unless we're coordinating closely with them, but it works well. I don't think it's a question of whether you completely own it or don't own it. I think the question is, do you have a governance model in place that allows for you effective operation and maintenance of that system for the benefit of the constituency.
Great, thank you. Let's talk about Cloud for Utilities, the organization, for a minute. So we launched the industry consortium earlier this year, had our our first big partner in that, Oracle. What are some of the things you guys want us to continue to do to expand the organization? We're working on best practices now. We've got our working groups formed. We've got the summit. We had the forum in Los Angeles earlier in the year. What are some of the things you guys want us to continue doing, maybe expand our offerings to our utility peers? I'll let you go first again, Denise.
Sure, I'll start, because I think one of the huge benefits of that industry consortium is the best practices. You know, we tend to learn from each other quite a bit, and so for Cloud for Utilities to provide an opportunity or the atmosphere for us to do that is a huge benefit. So I really like to see that expand so that we can learn from each other in a more facilitated way.
Right. I think as we expand our membership with utilities and technology firms, we'll have more help. I think even add more best practices. That's certainly my goal. What do you think about that, Tom? It's kind of a new thing. You're the new kid on the block with this team.
But you know, I think it's all about awareness, right, Rick? I think raising the profile of the organization so that people know that there's an avenue through which they can travel to get the experience that's already been gained by the folks that are doing these things,
Right.
and then leverage that experience in their own environment to, you know, not only shorten their adoption cycles, okay, but improve their adoption rate, you know, is going to be really important. I think that comes through things like best practices. I think it comes through, you know, creating more industry-based relationships, you know, with folks, both the application providers, but also the hardware providers, because, you know, the VMs of the world and the like, so that so people get an appreciation for what's going on here. I mean, we often look at utilities as being somewhat slow to adopt, but you know,
No comment.
there's some folks doing some pretty creative stuff here, and I think we need to start taking credit for that and getting a face on the idea.
I'll end with you, John.
I
Your
think
thoughts on
lessons
that?
learned. The sessions here have been fantastic for sharing sort of what's worked and importantly, some things that people would maybe do differently.
Right.
And then the conversations and the relationships that we make. We've got a number of vendors. We've got some that are sponsors that have gone on and done some things with us.
Right.
That's been valuable. So that connection with those that are in this field, I think, has been important as well.
Yeah, I agree. We've had some good support last year and this year. Well, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you at Cloud for Utilities Summit. Thank you.